All right, let's look at some blockbuster terminology, and the cat's here to help. All right, so first of all, let's look at some of the things about a blockbuster. So it usually has two colors. So it usually has the outline and one layer of the fill color. So it can be more, but generally that's what it is. So you can use both spray paint and paint rollers. But again, we talked about how paint rollers cover a larger area quicker. It's less expensive. They're used because they're simple in nature and they're easy to paint really quickly. So again, you want to cover as much space as quickly as possible. Letters have little or no spaces. If they do have spaces, they're covered up by the 3D. They're very large. They're done quickly, so that, again, they're usually considered vandalism. So again, the goal is to cover a large space in a short amount of time. So the definition of a blockbuster is 2 to 3 colors, so an outline and a fill. You do a large area to prevent other writers from painting over top of it. It's done quickly with spray paint or paint rollers. There are block letters with 3D, and there's little or no negative space, and they're usually vandalism. Okay. So now what's important here is some of the unwritten rules of graffiti, and that's what blockbusters take advantage of. So one of the rules is that you never paint over top of someone else's work unless yours is better. So that means that you need to know the local graffiti culture in the area, how those writers are viewed by the local graffiti community, and understand how all of that works. So you have to know, you may think that your piece is better, but then there's somebody that's held in high regard in the local community and you've just painted over top of your stuff. What would happen is anything that you painted in that area afterwards would be disrespected right away. It would be painted over like in an instant. You probably get the word toy written beside it. So there's definitely sort of a hierarchy of artists as well. There's a hierarchy in graffiti in terms of different levels. So the best is going to be a piece, and then it goes a blockbuster, throw up, and tags. So for example, you would never tag over top of a piece. You would never put a throw up over top of a piece. So that's something else that you need to know. You can never incorporate someone else's work into your own unless you have their permission. And this is the main rule that blockbusters really go over by. So if you have a huge blockbuster that's taken up a huge side of the building, if somebody's going to come along and do a piece over top of your blockbuster, they can only do this if they cover up your whole entire blockbuster, because you can't do just a section of it with your piece and have the rest of the blockbuster showing, because then you're incorporating your art with theirs. So if there is a whole blockbuster, what would happen is perhaps a whole crew would come out and there'd be 4 or 5 writers and they would cover the whole entire piece at once. So you either paint over the whole entire thing or not at all. And that's why blockbusters, they get to stay up a little bit longer. And that's sort of the whole purpose. Because of the size, they last longer. Because normally things last longer because, again, for the first rule, because of respect and quality and regard in the graffiti culture, and because of the hierarchy of levels of graffiti. So that's what the blockbuster really plays into. So the graffiti, when they're writing on the walls, it's all about communication with other graffiti writers. It's not necessarily messages meant for the public. It's a way that they communicate to each other through these rules. Okay? So some of the other rules in graffiti is to stay anonymous. So that's why you use your graffiti writers' names, because then the artwork speaks for themselves. Okay? So again, we talked about how communication is for other writers, not to the public. So space is important. So it's your graffiti writer's advertisement. So where you put your stuff is really important. So you get respect about where you put these pieces. So the longer they stay up, the better. So it's all about advertising for yourselves. It's all about fame. It's never about money. So because the graffiti has sort of a structure in terms of respect of different people, is the most valuable and skilled writers are known as kings. And they're the ones that can put crowns on their work to identify their status. I can go paint something and put a crown on there. Right away, I would be called a toy, and it would be covered up right away. And probably anything else that I put up would be covered up right away. So it takes a long time to gain that status as a king. So one of the things is that graffiti writers never write on religious sanctuaries. They say that real writers don't deface small businesses because graffiti writers are kind of the underdog, just like small businesses. And real graffiti, the essence of graffiti is illegal. It is vandalism. So what we are doing in our class is that we are learning about the graffiti culture, and we are learning about some of the tools and techniques about doing graffiti, but in no way are we actually doing real graffiti. Okay? So again, the purpose of a blockbuster is to cover a large amount of area to prevent other writers from writing over top of their work. So those rules that I just talked about is what lets blockbusters stay up for as long as they possibly can, right? Okay, so again, blockbuster, it's a simple block letters filled with an outline in a single color. There's little or no empty spaces. If there are any hollows, they're filled in through the 3D. And the 3D is added, and usually it's the same color as the outline. Now, when you're painting something really big, to keep all your letters the same size and to keep them straight, usually they use the bricks on the wall as a grid. You want to fill up the entire space. It's considered vandalism, and they're done with spray paint or paint rollers to be done quickly. Okay, so now you're going to do a really simple quiz, and you got 2 chances to do this quiz, and you're welcome to come back and look at the PowerPoint to review if you like. Good luck.